And, this guy is at the top of his game. Like, to get Julia Roberts and Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman at the top of their careers to say yes to the words that you wrote for them. And he was famous for not talking to his family in the morning. And as this was explained to me, he had spoken to them and said, listen, when I start talking to you, even if it's as mundane as, hey, who wants pancakes, who needs a ride to school, whatever. He said, as soon as I start doing that, I can't hear my characters' voices in my head. It's almost like you train a dog. Put the bowl out, and the dog is like, I know what happens next. This is going to be great,
Fresh insights into what it means to lead today.
And so I'll give you some examples because it's not just flow states. Flow states is definitely like the heart of it, but there's a whole self-awareness around this. So let me give you, because I want to move from the abstract into sort of concrete things, let me give you a couple of very concrete examples. One thing, so I'm a young, aspiring development executive. There at the time was a very successful screenwriter, Ron Bass, who wrote Rain Man and My Best Friend's Wedding, a bunch of stuff, right? And he was famous for not talking to his family in the morning. And as this was explained to me, he had spoken to them and said, listen, when I start talking to you, even if it's as mundane as, hey, who wants pancakes, who needs a ride to school, whatever. He said, as soon as I start doing that, I can't hear my characters' voices in my head. And that's what I get paid for. And paid well, like $1-2 million a script. So his family was like, super cool, Dad, go bring home $2 million. We can make the pancakes. We got you, right? And he knew that in the afternoon, he could do collaborative stuff. That's when he could do like studio note meetings and collabs with other writers and all that stuff. And that idea of understanding one's chronotype, like the concept that at certain times of day, you're more adept at doing certain kinds of things, that became super illuminating to me, where I was like, oh, wow, this guy really spent the time to go, how do I work best? One aspect of that is when I work on what? And, this guy is at the top of his game. Like, to get Julia Roberts and Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman at the top of their careers to say yes to the words that you wrote for them. Like, they have 30 other offers on their desk with offer checks stapled to the front, metaphorically. They could choose anything, but they chose yours. So that really speaks to him saying, like, this is how I optimize, what I do. And I've seen that applied now by many people in different ways, including when I was in SF, more part of the SF, say the hustle culture. And for a while, I bought into that thing of like, oh, if you want to be, doing engineering development, you're up late into the night. And, this was an era when like microdosing psilocybin or LSD was like biohacking to create great code. And I bought into that for a while. And I realized that whatever I would do that late at night, maybe I'd stay up until 4 working. That stuff from midnight to 4 was the stuff that got done. But then later I would look back at it and be like, we got to sort of refactor that. We got to optimize that. Like it works, but it is not the best way to write this and to build a foundation, for future stuff to be written. So that's, again, just starting to understand how to apply chronotype to yourself. That's one concrete example. May I give you another example? Fair? So one thing I noticed was the way some people, especially people who created things, and by that I mean created code, created words, created designs, like created, right? I mean not biz dev or sales or marketing kind of people, right? One of the things I noticed was when I had met Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. They were coming off Stargate and then went to do Independence Day, and then we did Godzilla together and some other stuff. So they had a house that they rented down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where they wrote. And they had to go down and write, and Roland told his assistant, Joey, Joey, go rent the villa for a month or two. We got to go do this. And she came back and she's like, it's already rented. It was like an Airbnb, before Airbnb. So she's like, somebody rented already. What do you want to do? Roland called his entertainment attorney, John Deemer, a fantastic attorney. And I was just like, John, buy the villa. By Monday, Roland owned a $5 million villa in the hills of Puerto Vallarta. This little kid from Virginia, had never seen anything like that. I was like, what just happened in front of me? Huh? And I talked to Dean. I was like, Can you walk me through this? 'Cause, like, my parents' home is worth a fraction of this vacation rental that Roland bought on a whim. Um, and Dean said, there is a room there where in the morning the light comes in over the pool. And there's something about that room where we write in there and we never think about what are the studio notes we're going to get? What cast is available on what schedule? What's the budget going to be? He's right. We just write the movie we'd want to see. So it's worth it for us to have that. Now, I'll mention 6 weeks later, Roland and Dean came back with the script that became the third highest grossing movie in film history at the time. And it worked for them. That they knew that there was something about that place that got them in a mental space of, let's write something great and let's not be distracted with all this noise of like, well, Michael Hunter's not available in the spring, so we'll have to write the role for Stephen Puri, like none of that garbage. And it is not to say that you need a $5 million budget to go have a mental space, because years later, when I'm with Alex Kurtz and Bob Orsi, who are, the writers of Transformers 1 and 2, Zorro, Mission Impossible 3, Star Trek 11. I mean, my God, like huge. I don't know how many billions of dollars of box office, right? When they got in the crunch time, hey, you got to deliver Transformers 2 in the next 2 weeks. We were on the little Amblin compound on the Universal Studios lot in Hollywood, right? Beautiful little area that Steven has there. They would have their assistant rent a room at the Universal Hilton across the street, which I'm just going to say, it's not a luxury villa in Puerto Vallarta, right? This is where you stay with your kids the night before you go on the rides, and then you get out. And I was like, they could go they're also making $1-2 million a script. They could rent a home anywhere. Why a hotel room across the street? And what hit me one day was they had met back in school. And I think for them, the experience of Kurtzman on the edge of the bed with his MacBook and Bob at the little desk on his MacBook and brainstorming what comes next, it evoked dorm room. It brought them back to, we are scrappy writers who must prove ourselves, and this is how we do it, and this is how we came up, and this is how we got on Alias and Hercules and Xena and those early shows where they proved themselves to later become $1 million writers. And that is just another, if chronotype is one concrete idea where it's like, hey man, just measure for yourself what you feel best doing over a week or two, and you'll start to see your patterns. Another idea is simply place. Like, because many of us work remote, or we work in different areas, you can work from a coffee shop, your office, your home, your kitchen, your living room, it does become somewhat chaotic to your brain, as opposed to if you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to write my blog every day from this coffee shop or from my office at home, or I'm going to do my coding at this desk. When you come to that place, your brain starts to go like, oh, hey, I know why I'm here. It's almost like you train a dog and put the bowl out, and the dog is like, I know what happens next. This is going to be great, So those are some just concrete ideas around this general topic of flow states and how to manage your brain.